Welcome to Red Wheelbarrow Happy Hour, and we're doing a special thing tonight. We're going to be reading from the NaNoWriMo collective novel. So I'm super excited to hear everybody's chapters. I write on Thanksgiving, and so that's pretty late in the storyline, and means I have to keep track of a lot of things. And it seems to me like Sean usually writes after me too. So I also want to leave something good for him, and I never know whether or not I'm successful, but I'll tell you what, Marion always figures it out at the end and pulls it all together no matter what the rest of us have done. So that happened again this year. She started us out and she finished us off, and this is a really, normally we do this at Village Books, but we're here on Zoom. The cool thing about that is that we can record it. And so what I'm going to do is on my screen, I'm going to put us on speaker view at some point so that only the speaker is on the recording and not everybody else. So if you have things that you want to say to me or let me know about, use the chat because I won't be able to see you waving frantically. Although Lisa may be able to keep an eye on that if there's if I make a mistake or we skip somebody, or I'm going to try to avoid that too by taking roll call here in a minute. So we're going to take roll call, and welcome to those of you who are visiting. There are visitors, our family members who followed along and friends who followed along. You're welcome, and it's nice to see you, and you're in for a treat. So do we have any announcements that need to be made before we get started?
Yes.
Lisa?
I put everybody on mute also, so just keep that in mind that if you pop on to read, you're muted, so you're going to need to unmute yourself. Hover over the screen and on the bottom left, click the little microphone to unmute. I did a drawing right before we came online here because I have prizes. And I'm happy to report that for the first year ever, every chapter was in on time. There was one technical glitch, which I'm not going to count against the person. So our prize winners were Carrie Deal. She wins the tote bag.
Woo, woo, woo. Nice.
Yay, Carrie, I'm so happy to see you here. And then Sean Dwyer won the drawing for the water bottle.
Nice. Lucky Sean. Love it.
So I will get that to
you. Thank you. I'd like to thank my family and all of my, never mind.
Oh, thank you. I actually thought Lisa muted you in the middle. Okay, so unmute yourself and say here when I call your name so that I know who to call out for reading, because we'll skip over the chapters where nobody's here to read. And remember that you're reading for just 3 minutes. And I'm going to trust that you timed yourself so that we're not, I don't have to time you and interrupt you. So that should be, 3 minutes should probably be about 300, maybe 400 words. It's not going to be that many words. So hopefully you've practiced, and you can just call it to a close and then say thank you at the end. And so I will introduce your name. You'll jump on. You'll just start reading right away. You'll say thank you. We'll all give you twinkle fingers, and then I'll call the next person. So rest assured, we're laughing. You just can't hear us. We're laughing and cheering all the way. So I know you're here, Marion.
Yeah.
Jess? I saw Jess. Amory?
Here.
Linda Lambert?
Here.
Abby?
Here.
Janet? I saw you, Janet. Yeah. Kari, do you say Kari or Carrie?
Carrie.
Carrie?
I'm here.
Good. Carol McMillan. Has she arriveth? No.
I haven't seen her. I'll go pop in email and make sure.
Okay, I'm putting a circle next to her name. Victoria, I saw you. Yeah. Dick?
Yep, here.
Good. Noelle? I see.
Here.
Mary Lou?
Present.
Judy? I think Judy told me for the first year ever she couldn't make it. So we're recording. Say hello to Judy. Give her a wave. Kate Miller.
Here.
Good. Laurel Seville. Laurel may not be here. Carol McMillan 2. Is she here yet? Okay. Amanda Blaine.
Here.
Yay. Mary Louise Van Dyke.
Here.
Yay. Okay. Al. I saw you, Al. Heidi.
Present.
Okay. Isabel Castro. Isabel. No, Isabel? Okay. If any of these people jump on in the next before they're reading, make sure that somebody texts me to let me know in the chat. Brenda,
Here.
Sky,
Here.
Laura Rink,
Here.
Mary Lou 2, and then Cammie, and then Sean,
Me. Yeah.
Patty. No Patty. And then Sean number 2, and then Marion. Okay, so we're only missing a couple people, and I think we'll have Carol on. I bet you anything she'll join us at some point. Is everybody ready?
Mhm.
All right. Marion, take it away.
Well, my job in chapter 1 is to set out a range of characters for later writers to play with. And in this story, the museum itself is one of the characters. As the last footsteps faded away, the Walker Museum settled with an almost audible sigh. The building had served many uses since it had been abandoned by its first owner a century and a half before. A jail, a house of worship, even a bordello during Prohibition. With each reincarnation, a room, a floor, or a wing had been added, so that now the exterior resembled a Gothic wedding cake, a patchwork of grey stone and red brick, with turrets, porticos, and useless little Juliet balconies tacked on randomly. Inside was a rabbit warren of oddly shaped rooms, winding corridors and staircases, some imposing and some no better than a ship's ladder. The edifice was impossible to heat or clean effectively. Now, dust motes danced and shadows shifted in the dim emergency lighting. A floorboard creaked. A draft from nowhere ruffled the balance sheets and profit and loss statements the museum director had left on her desk when she hurried to meet arriving board members. In the picture gallery, portraits of long-dead town worthies with stiff collars and luxuriant moustaches eyed each other with suspicion. The stuffed great auk in the natural history diorama on the second floor dropped another feather, while the Victorian dolls in the adjacent display case maintained their prim, close-mouthed smiles. And the hairline crack in the dome over the grand staircase grew another 2 inches. Thank you.
Nice. Chapter 2, Jess Stone.
This is a snappy little sex scene. The fabric slid from her shoulders and pooled at her feet. Pete didn't say a word. He set his glass on the table next to hers, wrapped his arms around his wife, and lowered her to the sofa. Their time together was a well-choreographed dance that rarely held surprises. Tony knew precisely what she wanted and how she wanted it. Early on, she had educated him, and he'd been a perfect student. Now, at the apex of their lovemaking, he glanced at their reflection shimmering in the expansive wall of glass, waving images backlit with points of light, city and star. They fit so well together, male and female, taut in mid-arc, husband and wife melding. If only the rest of their marriage could be this effortless. He looked down at her beautiful face, her eyes closed, fringed with long lashes, her pouting lips open just wide enough for a gasp. He breathed deep, moved slow, now faster, now only a single shudder away. Wait! Her eyes snapped open. He froze, mid-thrust, held her immobile. He hoped that she wanted, but he knew she didn't. What? His word came out like a croak. Paul Hansen. Who? Her eyes flashed sparks in their dark pools. Paul Hansen, the developer. He's looking for a building, something with character, something avant-garde, to create a high-end community with condos and galleries and a cafe. The old museum is exactly the right property. And I would represent both the seller and the buyer. Oh, darling. She dug her nails into his shoulders, her voice breathy. Do you think the timing is right? Do you think it's too late for me to call him? Pete pulled back, lowered his wife to the black leather sofa, and stood. No, my darling, your timing is perfect. Thank you.
Nice. Thank you, Jess. Chapter 3, Amory Peck.
The spontaneous meal at the brewery was the first time in weeks she'd done anything other than work, improvise a meal, sleep, and repeat. Regretfully, the museum had become her world. Though they did a bit of museum conversation, Lindsay and Andrew agreed to put shop talk aside for the night. Instead, they wandered through the sorts of things new friends discuss when propelled by rich, greasy food and glasses of the brewery's best IPA. Topics ranged from choice of pizza toppings, both agreed no pineapple, Schitt's Creek, yes, CNN or MSNBC was a split vote. After a few end-of-the-evening comments, the non-date dinner came to a close. Andrew excused himself, but Lindsay wasn't ready to head home quite yet. One more beer seemed called for. That's it, she thought to herself. Enough of my self-indulgent pity party. Time to regather, recharge, and redo that waste of a time meeting today. I'll start planning a special board meeting right now. I'm off to my desk. No time to waste. Lindsay put the key into the lock and shoved the door open with a push from her shoulder. The heavy old museum door was always difficult to open, but she'd learned the right technique. It couldn't be done without the door making quite a screech. That complaint from the door was just part of all the quirky sounds she'd grown accustomed to in her beloved but cranky old building. Lindsay whistled as she entered. It wasn't that she was afraid in the dark building. It was just a trait she'd picked up from her dad, a jaunty attitude while walking along. Hi-ho, it's off to work we go, she whistled. Not afraid at all. But still, Lindsay was startled by the sound of, no, the sense of scurrying around her. With a shake of her head and an increase in the volume of her hi-ho, she continued to her office. Lindsay settled in at her desk, determined to make right the mistakes of today's meeting. She sat in deep contemplation and also a touch of drowsiness. She had ordered 2 silver linings IPAs with Andrew and a third while she sat there alone. In that state of reverie, she noticed, but only slightly, whispering noises around her. She snapped from her dream state with an explosive exclamation of people. We need people in here at night. Wine tastings, PJ story hours, haunted house tours. At that, the museum emitted a sorrowful, angry moan. Lindsay's 1904 first edition of R.M. James' Ghost Stories of an Antiquary fell to the floor at her feet. Thank you.
Nice. Nice work, Anne-Marie. Linda Lambert.
Ted Davis' full name was Theodore Chandler Davis III, the only child of Angela Marie Smithfield, a high school language teacher, and T.C. Davis Jr., the owner of a string of profitable $1 only stores. On the day of Theodore's birth, T.C. said, "We are not calling him Teddy, and never Theo. With a handle like Theodore, he can be anything, a judge, a stockbroker, or a doctor," which happened to be the list he'd had for himself before discovering the work his gifts matched. In early childhood, Theodore was a minefield of hyperactivity, a clever, precocious preschooler with a tear-drenched face when his Jenga blocks toppled. The Game Boy was extracted from his hands, or he lost a big wheel race. He's normal, Angie, TC said. You know, terrible twos. Yeah, honey, but he's 4 and you know that, and I'm going crazy. I used to be able to coax him with laughter with his tickle me Elmo, but now all he does is get loud and restless and angry. I'm afraid there's something wrong with him. But he did grow up and go to college, and in spite of parental objections, Theodore became Ted. 4 years later, with a new environmental policy degree, he got a half-time starter job for a company whose noble mission was to transform sewage infrastructure into public health observations. He worked with pee and poop each day, but concentrating on fetid pollutants wasn't his long-term goal. His job gave him freedom. He ran for city council. His shtick as a bike everywhere working class hero held little persuasion for voters. In a town trying to beef up its art district, he was aced out by the middle-aged maestro of the local symphony who had a sprawling network of contributors to the arts. His mother advised, "You visited all those crazy museums, Theodore. Why don't you apply for the museum board? There's a vacancy." The UFO Museum in Roswell, New Mexico, and the Bordello Museum in Wallace, Idaho were not intentional destinations, just diversions on long-haul bike rides. So he sprinkled his application with those and other museum visits and ended up with a seat on the board where he was a strident voice. He wondered if he should clean up his language. No shit, Sherlock just didn't sound professional. But he wasn't going to change his name to Theodore. Thanks.
Nice. Thank you, Linda. Great. Chapter 5.
Okay.
Rolnick.
Quiet. I say quiet over and over, an impossible task for people. You all leave me with your voices, your thoughts, your careless remains. You've gone, but I still hear you, echoes of time. These walls have listened, counseled, borne the brunt of centuries of good and bad intentions. I've made the decision to show you the consequences of your folly. I'll begin today with the rustling of dust, a shake or two of floorboards, a malfunction of the furnace. I hope I can guide Lindsay to the grand staircase, and even outside to the useless balconies. I need her to see. Lindsay arrived at the museum at precisely 7:50 a.m. After she unlocked the doors, turned off the alarm, she took her ritual breath. She caught at the scent of age. Everyone complained about the displays, the lack of audience, but Lindsay knew in her bones that the museum had potential. She sniffed again. Cursing under her breath, she followed the burnt smell to the furnace room. The bowels of the museum groaned as Lindsay rubbed her hand along the bumps on the wall. They cried for attention. Black soot and lines covered so many years of neglect. The furnace clicked over and over, a sure sign that the electric starter had failed. Fearful that the whole building would explode, she turned it off. Lindsay dialed Catherine's house. The phone rang, and finally someone picked up. "Hi, this is Lindsay over at the Walker Museum. Is Catherine there?" The woman on the other end took forever to answer, as if the world had impeded on her dreams. When the woman finally spoke, Lindsay's heart went numb. "Catherine? You mean Catherine, my daughter? She isn't here. She leaves me alone to take care of the museum. I need her. It's the curse that has a hold of me. They say Josiah left a fortune for the town, but he left a home a century ago, and still there's nothing for his family. Catherine knows the place better than she knows me. Why are you calling me? I'm lost. Can you help? Can I help you?" Lindsay knew the signs of dementia, the signs of mental fogginess that placed a loved one in a different state. "Mrs. Walker, you were so kind to ask. I'd love to hear about Josiah and his life. I'll ask Catherine if I can come by one day. I want to make sure she has a sweater as the furnace isn't working. Yes, the cold touches the bones, hardens the heart. You could check in the basement or in the hidden rooms. All the good stuff is stashed there."
Yes, moving the story forward, and the museum speaks. Great. Janet Oakley, chapter 6. Janet, unmute yourself. I'm looking for, there you are.
Okay, sorry. As Catherine passed the staircase that led to the second floor of the museum, she looked up to the top of the stairs where a huge portrait of museum's founder hung, Josiah Disparet Walker, my great-grandfather. Today she thought his eyes had shifted, like they were appealing to something to her. Catherine took the elevator up to the fourth floor and turned on the light in her office. The room was separated from the expansive floor space and that held crates and shelves of all kinds of things. It had been years since they could afford a curator of acquisitions, so there was a huge backlog of cataloging. At least here in her office, there was some organization. Though windowless, her office felt snug and safe with its bookshelves and cabinets. Everything was in order. Dad would approve. Catherine finished up her tasks for the school tours. The fourth floor was finally warm, but she had to squeeze her hands to bring warmth back into them. She moved around some old posters from past exhibits rolled up in tubes in a tall box. She unrolled one and smiled. It was from an exhibit on masks from back in the 1990s. They had been incredibly lucky to get a Darth Vader mask used in the filming of The Empire Strikes Back. The museum was doing so well then. Dad was on the museum board and loving it. But what is my purpose here? She rolled the poster up and stuck it down into the box. Something stopped it from going to the bottom. She pulled the mask poster out and leaning over, she reached deep into the box. Her stiff fingers touched the smooth feel of metal. She pulled her hand away as if she got burned. What? Catherine pulled out an old cash box. There was a faded label with a red border on top. It was too hard to read. The only way to find out what was inside was to shake it. The box rattled a single clunk. Seriously? Catherine took it back to her desk and tested the latch on the front. It opened with, was that a sigh? Catherine looked around, feeling an odd presence in the room. Inside, she found a brass key and a note. For the elevator. Catherine held the key in her fingers and turned it around. Why did it end up in the bottom of the storage box? There was a keyhole below the elevator's panel. No one knew what it was for. I wonder, she thought. She went over to the elevator and pushed the button to send for it. The doors immediately opened. Stepping in, she tested the key in the slot. It slipped in like a knife in melted butter. Suddenly, the elevator doors shut. The elevator began to descend. Wait, Catherine shouted. I didn't say go. She frantically pressed on the second floor button and watched in horror as the elevator passed it and continued on down. It has to stop at the basement. Please stop. It didn't stop at the basement. Help, she cried out. She pounded on the panel in the door. When she tried to take out the key, it stayed stuck. The elevator kept going until it slowed down like it was floating on air. Catherine was close to fainting when the elevator came to a gentle stop. It rested, then opened the doors. Who are you? She addressed the figure in the dim hallway.
Okay. So Janet gives us the key that takes us downstairs. Carrie Deal, Chapter 7.
The room's sole guardian towered to within a few inches of the 15-foot ceiling. Identical red and black faces were painted on the four sides of its high pedestal, grinning in menace and mockery, tongues out thrust. Archibald gave a low whistle. Would you look at that? Lindsay, focus your light higher. A single torso and head, carved from western red cedar, arose from the box-like pedestal, looking for all the world like a sprung jack-in-the-box. Its puppet-like face was painted white with black hair and, could it really be, mutton chop sideburns? Huge, googly eyes reminded Archibald a little bit of the old silent Felix the Cat movies he'd watched as a kid, except Felix had never sported a disproportionately tall potlatch hat or sat on an elaborately decorated bentwood box. It looks like some sort of totem pole. Catherine lifted her arm up and tentatively ran her fingers along the seamless edge of the pedestal. But Professor McNair, I've never seen a totem pole that looks like this, with just a single figure. Shouldn't there be other characters, bears or wolves or eagles? And it's painted to look like Like a white man, Archibald finished her sentence for her as he slowly walked around the totem, marking its characteristics. It's a caricature of a white man. Is it some sort of joke? Asked Lindsay. From a carnival or something? A fake totem pole that somehow ended up in a hidden subterranean chamber? She rolled her eyes. It's no joke, my dear, Archibald responded, shaking his head. Never in all my years as a Pacific Northwest historian have I encountered one of these this far south of Alaska, or at least not one this old. I'd need better light to be sure, but I think this must be 19th century, perfectly authentic and perfectly preserved. See how vibrant the colors are, bright as the day they were painted. This looks like it's never felt the rain or even seen the light of day, which would be incredibly odd because, he pointed, see how, while the face is white, the ears and nostrils have been painted red? That's telling. This is a shame totem pole, the kind the 19th century Coast Salish and Tlingit and other indigenous carvers made when they wanted to publicly embarrass someone for failing to pay a debt or to right a wrong. That's it.
Nice. So Carrie gives us the shame pole. Excellent. We're going to skip to chapter 9, Victoria.
Margaret, the Great Auk.
I was here for 8.
What? Oh, Carol's here.
Carol's here.
Carol's here. Hold
Carol.
the phone, Victoria.
What?
Chapter 8. Carol McMillan makes an appearance, and then
She does.
Victoria.
Better late than never. So Lindsay couldn't sleep. She was so concerned about everything that was going on. She was thinking about the pole, and she was worrying about that. She worried about the handicap access. Where should they put the pole? Should they leave it where it is? And then she started thinking about Ted and how Ted had criticized all the exhibits, and boy, this would be something, this would show Ted if they had that. But oh man, what if the local tribes actually already knew about this? And if the local tribes knew about this, were they angry about it being in the museum? And is that why they never would answer every time she reached out for them? Lindsay sighed, and she tried to go back to sleep and started doing deep breathings so that she could finally close her eyes and finally get back to sleep. Well, just as her eyes were finally closing, Catherine's eyes just bolted open because she'd been having these strange dreams. And this was another one. Someone was taking her by the hand, or something, it might not even have been a someone, was taking her by the hand and leading her up the stairs of the museum and stopped in front of her great-grandpa Josiah's picture. And she was looking at it like she was supposed to notice something. And the mutton chops. Yeah, he had mutton chops, and he had that tie around with a bow around his neck. And all of a sudden she thought, oh, that's exactly it. That's why it really is him. For sure is him. So she realized that the shame pole was undoubtedly her grandpa's. She couldn't wait to go and check it out and make certain, her great-grandpa's. So realizing that sleep would elude her for a while, Catherine grabbed her fleece robe from the hook on the back of the bedroom door and padded downstairs in the dark, waiting to switch on a light till she entered the kitchen. As the light clicked on, she startled to see her mother seated in one of the oak kitchen chairs. Marilyn's long gray hair reached down the chair's ladder back. Mom, what are you doing sitting in the dark? He ate my sandwich. Huh? Who ate your sandwich? Your dad. Catherine walked to the table and looked down to see breadcrumbs scattered on the blue patterned salad plate in front of her mom. Oh, Mom, I'm sure you ate it. You've just forgotten. Oh, no, turkey. I made it with mayonnaise and mustard and lettuce, just the way I like. Then he ambled in, leaned on the table, didn't even say a word, but picked it up and started eating. Catherine had lost patience with her mother's strange stories. Mom, Dad's been gone for years now. Ghosts can't eat sandwiches. Think about it. Once he bit into it, it would just fall right through him onto the floor. She recognized the futility of her weak logic, even as the words came out of her mouth. She ran to the museum the next morning, and just as Lindsay was starting to open the front door, so excited she told Lindsay that they had to go downstairs and look right now at the totem pole. So they did. They go down to the bottom, and lo and behold, there it is, the tie around his neck with the bow tie in front of it. And Catherine's positive that's her grandpa. So Lindsay goes back, grateful for that comment, up to her office, and she's checking out. She Googles the Tlingit chief in 1869 in Seward, when Seward went to Alaska. Sure enough, there it is. Went on the steamship, the Active. An hour later, the museum's heavy front door creaked open, and Tony came in, leading two men dressed in neat, expensive suits. Taller one carried a briefcase with a logo for Seaview Properties Incorporated. And Tony is trying to sell the museum to these guys to develop it. End of chapter.
Thank you, Carol. Carol disguised as Lisa Daly on my control panel. Excellent. And now for reals, chapter 9, Victoria Dorper. You muted yourself instead of unmuted.
Sorry. Okay.
Take 3. It's still muted, honey.
Now, thank you. Sorry. Margaret, the great auk, found the window's placement ironic. Just outside her diorama, windowsill a feather or two higher than her head. Spectacular view of rocky shore and sea, so she'd been told. Close as she would ever get to the site of anything resembling her former habitat, and she couldn't see it. If she fell down and rolled to stillness at just the right angle below the window, she could catch a glimpse of clouds gliding by, almost feel the rhythm and lap of waves against her feathery sides. But then she'd startle back to reality and realize she was on an unforgiving, hard floor in this alien place. Margaret had always known where she belonged, alive or dead. She'd been dead for over a century. By now, her body should have disassociated and transformed, maybe into seawater, ebbing and flowing. She could have felt the sun again as she swirled, crested, and foamed over the rocks of Iceland's shores, or ridden the waves as a scattering of bright algae. But here she was kept intact by stitches and glue. Lately, the living ones had failed to reattach feathers that had dropped to the floor. What were they thinking? But then Margaret's experience led her to believe that human living ones rarely thought about the consequences of what they did or did not do. Margaret and her mate had been killed over 100 years ago by 2 fishermen. She'd been sent to a taxidermist and stuffed, humiliating. She'd been bought, sold, and traded, as if in life or death, she'd never been more than feathers, beak, and bones, as if she'd never meant anything to the grand pattern of planet Earth except to benefit humans. Of course, it was right that she not live forever, but each individual would die. Each one received and each one gave back. But the human living ones had taken and taken and taken without guilt or shame and never given back. So here she was on the floor with nothing to do but ponder the past until someone wandered in and returned her to her place right behind the placard labeled Great Auk Extinct. Some debts can be repaid, thought Margaret. For others, there is only punishment or atonement. One way or another, balance would be restored. She was sure of that. Thank you.
Nice. We can always count on Victoria for an animal perspective, but I do believe that was the first dead animal perspective that we'd had. Nicely done. Chapter 10, Dick Little.
Thank you, Victoria. I loved it. Chapter 10. The day after the discovery at the museum, Archibald McNair needed some processing time. After dinner and helping with the dishes as usual, he repaired to his tasteful book-lined study. He gave perfunctory jabs at the fire with a wrought iron poker, replaced it in its rack, then settled into his leather easy chair. He reached to the end table for the Venetian cut crystal decanter of his favored 12-year-old scotch and poured himself a healthy glassful. He didn't suspect that his wife, Emma, regularly refilled the bottle with the cheapest swill she could find at Bevmo. Whatever the mystery that he no longer knew one brand from another, Archie, Professor McNair, PhD, History, Southwest New Mexico A&M, retired, did enjoy his scotch. He took a few sips, then tapped a plug of imported Mac Baren tobacco into his beloved meerschaum pipe, the soft amber of its bowl bespeaking its age, and lit up. He was not fooled about pipe tobacco, particularly the Scottish brand. He just chose to ignore the fact that it consisted of Virginia tobacco accentuated with a smidgen of Scotch whiskey. At his age, Archie'd read every book he imagined reading, published enough books and articles to sate his ego, and deliberately partook of zero interest in current affairs. His only nod to academia and his career these days was to help guide the fortunes, or lack thereof, of the local Walker Museum. Even there, his interest had been waning, too much teeth gnashing about money, not enough about esoterica. But yesterday had come as a surprise even to his jaundiced self. Before long, he nodded off. Archie blinked his eyes open. He listened carefully. Emma had gone upstairs to bed. When he was sure she'd left, she rarely came back down after her evening toilette. He got up out of his chair, then slipped into his forest green fleece-lined monogrammed Patagonia parka from REI and let himself out the back door. On the landing, he reached into the jacket pocket and took out a plastic baggie filled with a certain vegetable material he'd gotten from his fellow museum board member, Ted Davis. Scored, he remembered, was the term. The quid pro quo had been a promise to support young Ted in his next political venture, whatever that might be, about which Archie neither knew nor cared. Thank you.
Great. We move some of the characters forward. Thank you, Dick. Chapter 11, Noelle Davenport.
Okay, introduction. Two nefarious intruders are entering the museum in the dead of night. Their intentions are as yet unknown, but Mother Museum knows when it comes to the living ones, nothing good happens after midnight. Chapter 11. Oh dear, I say to myself, not wanting to worry the children, when I feel a disturbance down below. Someone was fighting to open the back door. They obviously weren't familiar with this particular back door. She preferred to be sweet-talked a little, finessed before allowing passage into our sacred home. Even for a person holding the key, without the right technique, she would only give way after a serious struggle, a bit of profanity, and a loud screech that alerted the whole family to any visitors. There were 2 visitors tonight, and even at this unusually late hour, the children didn't pay them much attention. They were familiar with both of them, one more so than the other. Plus, after dark was their time, not to be wasted on the living ones downstairs. There was only a brief lull in the nightly hubbub as they popped their heads up, acknowledging the presence of the visitors before resuming their activities. The stuffy old men in the portrait gallery went on arguing over the establishment of law and order in the frontier states, crossing their arms over their chests, huffing defiantly. Charles, the manatee, was yet again attempting to create a ramp with his body for Margaret to scale in her never-ending quest to look out the second-floor window. Unbeknownst to her, Charles had confided in me, some 40 years ago, that he had a bit of a crush on Margaret. And I could see why. She certainly puts the great in great awe. The wolf cubs were playfully tumbling around, and the Victorian dolls were out of their case, arms locked in a tight circle, dusty foreheads touching, giggling like schoolgirls. I don't even want to know what they are going on about. Thank you.
Nicely done, Noelle. That's great. Little love affair between the dead creatures. Good. So we're going to skip chapters 12 and 13 and move to Kate Miller, chapter 14. Kate Miller.
I hope I hit the right button.
You did.
Okay. Dropped half of my story. Meanwhile, chaos ruled at the museum. Lindsay and Catherine and Pete helped get all the children downstairs, and with the guidance of teachers, dressed the kids in their raincoats and boots, ready to board buses back to school. Almost all of the children had decided the whole tour was an exciting adventure now that they were ready to leave, and were exchanging stories about dinosaurs creeping through the halls, and dolls dancing on the shelves, and wolves howling in the elevator, and a great auk and a manatee rolling around the ballroom floor like they were dancing. And when they had looked up at the huge dome above the stairs, they all swore that they could see the sun glittering through the crack in the ceiling, even though it was pouring outside. The museum let out an audible sigh, startling Lindsay, but she couldn't help it. She was so relieved that everyone else had left, leaving her alone with the two living ones that could be her family's salvation, if only. Her family had done her proud, making the kids scream, more in excitement than terror, or so she hoped. Now the women who might just be able to discover her secrets were alone with her. At last, she sighed again. Lindsay stood up and ran up the steps until she caught up with Catherine, who had stopped and was staring up at the gap in the dome. The dust had cleared, and a jagged crack split the white ceiling above their heads. Though the crack glowed the most amazing bright light, like rays of sun spilling through dark clouds and filling the whole stairwell and entryway with glittering gold. Catherine gasped and grabbed Lindsay's hand. They both shook in astonishment as the gilded light infused the air, covered the floor, and spread down the stairwell like melting butter. The women looked at each other in wonder. They knew that the dome had not cracked fully open, that the rip in the seam of the dome had only exposed another ceiling above the white plaster. But what was that glow? The light that shone like the sun, but was not the sun? Could the ceiling showing through the crack be gold leaf? But why cover up that beautiful light with plain white plaster? None of the architectural maps either of them had ever seen had hinted at any space between the inside of the dome and the outside roof. And in this museum, these women, sorry about that. Inside the museum, the women were learning where there were hidden rooms and corridors and nooks and crannies and unexpected sub-basement, there was treasure. Now the only problem was how to get to that secret space between the dome and the roof of the museum. What amazing mysteries waited for them there. Catherine and Lindsay looked down at their clasped hands, up into the fire sparking in each other's eyes, and laughed. It seemed as if the museum was laughing delightedly along with them. Well, we better get busy looking for more secret entrances into this golden crawl space, Catherine said. Time is wasting, and what's been disappeared has to appear again sometime. Thank you.
Nice. Now the crack opens. Excellent. Skipping chapter 15. Moving to chapter 16, Carol McMillan. Carol, unmute yourself.
Okay. Hopefully I will go back to where I was. All right. When Lydia returned to the bank, she was gratified to see piles of small sacks loaded on a table beside the balance scale. Mr. Hanson himself conducted the weighing and calculation of the value of each bag, until finally reaching the total Mrs. Walker had requested. And here are the quarters you asked for. I'm afraid you've wiped out our entire allotment. Oh, I'm so very grateful, Mr. Hanson. It's a pleasure doing business with such a considerate institution. Jonathan loaded the bags of nuggets into his larger canvas bags, carrying each out to the carriage where Lydia clutched her embroidered bag, now filled with all the bank's 1870 seated Liberty quarters, remained standing, keeping watch until everything was loaded. Returning to the estate, 5 native men were waiting to help unload the sacks into the barn. They promptly began the process that Lydia had been able to research and could now describe for them. Each nugget was repeatedly rolled thinner and thinner by adjusting the width between the metal rollers on the devices she had made. Days later, the bags of nuggets had been transformed into paper-thin sheets of various sizes. The natives had been sworn to secrecy about the tasks they'd performed and paid well to maintain that secret. With sparse communication between whites and local natives, Lydia felt her project would be safe from prying eyes and ears. The workmen loaded the gold back into the carriage again, this time in flat boxes. Lydia drove herself into town, wanting as few people as possible to have any idea what was going on. Driving to the back entrance of the museum, the native carvers greeted her and carried each box up to the top of the grand staircase, where a huge dome had just been completed. Paint each section with adhesive, as I showed you, then press the gold foil. Try to make the pieces fit together as much as you can. Start at the center of the dome and work down until you've run out of gold. The weight should be distributed evenly enough that it will hold. When you've finished, you'll construct the second dome just below the first. When the second dome is completed, you may go to the bank. They have cash waiting for each one of you, enough to more than pay for your return trip home. You will be extremely well rewarded for your workmanship and your secrecy in this matter. The men nodded. Lydia knew they were proud of their craftsmanship and that the work would be done to the highest standards. With their return north, there'd be little chance of the word leaking out. Lydia headed downstairs. She had a key to the small basement room, merely a closet off the slightly larger room. Being a limited edition, she knew her coins would have great value by the time Josiah Jr. would need to cash them in. She'd leave him a map and an explanation for both treasures when she wrote out her will, which she'd been meaning to do since his birth. Even if someone discovered the false dome, she doubted anyone would find those coins in the back of the basement. Settling the bag onto the top shelf, Lydia turned to leave. Suddenly, the walls began to shake. A loud moaning sounded throughout the building. Stones began falling, and the ceiling of the room right outside the closet collapsed, sealing Lydia's fate as she vainly rattled the door, already choking on the dust-filled air inside the small space. The museum cleared her non-existent throat. No one was going to cheat Josiah and get away with it if she had any say about it. The workmen wondered at the earthquake, but the dome remained intact, so they set about their assignments. While each man worked, he was already visualizing return to his homeland in the giant cedars.
And that's how Lydia gets to die where she dies. Great. Chapter 17, Amanda Blaine. Good job, Carol.
Rawr! Carmen twitched and opened her eyes, dreamed distorted images of shame poles and late 1800 petticoats slipping out of her attention. Near her bench where she sat, a girl shrieked and ran, and a boy snarled and stalked her through the grass. they didn't notice her. Stop it! I'll tell Mom! He chased her a little longer. Then as she started crying, he straightened and said, fine, you don't have to tell on me. Instead, we can both be the wolf cubs and we can be stalking all the kids. There were wolf cubs at the museum too? And was the stuffed wolf really just out in the open in the exhibit for all to see? She laughed to herself. That seemed too obvious. She didn't know what it was about those papers she and McNair had looked through last night. She felt such a raw, unbearable feeling in her chest. She tried not to think about shame and shame, namely that they were the same thing. She had never connected her research topic, shame polls of the Tlingit people, with the shame in her own people, non-practicing descendants of Pennsylvania Dutch. In fact, she'd never thought of herself as having a people. Her dive back into her historian self last night and the irresistible draw to keep discovering what was true had been, well, almost joyful. How strange that the man who had taken this away from her was now the one to bring it back into her life. How could she betray herself by feeling a sense of companionship with Professor McNair? He had destroyed her life, and she wanted him to feel her power now. But how did that fit with the old man of last night who could hardly walk without a cane?
Nice. Thank you, Amanda. We really stuck to it this year. It's so interesting and fun. Chapter 18, Mary Louise Van Dyke.
Well, Lindsay struggled to sound positive. Today, after the fourth graders' tour is over, let's get out the extension ladder and see if we can discover something more about that crack over the grand staircase. A crack? Still upset from his dream of his dead grandfather and the red fiery eyes, banker Jeff Hansen strode into the office and glared at Lindsay and Catherine. What about it? It opened up, Catherine said, and the floor shook. Really? When were you going to call a museum board meeting about that interesting fact? Lindsay watched the floorboards rise and fall as if someone was pushing from underneath. Jeff grabbed the edge of her desk for ballast. If this was an earthquake, it was the strangest one she'd ever encountered. I was going to work on a memo today, she lied. His brown eyes narrowed. Well, my neighbor shared the news with me. Seems like it's hard to keep a secret when third graders blabbed their families about what happened. Dinosaurs moving around? The floor rippled again, harder and higher, bearing Jeff up with it. He floundered, lost the battle with his balance, and smacked onto the floor. A heavy vase slid off Lindsay's desk and clunked his head. Lindsay and Catherine stared at the unconscious man. I had the feeling something's not pleased that he's here, Catherine murmured. I know I'm not, Lindsay agreed. This was their quest, her and Catherine's. Deep inside, Lindsay realized the museum wanted them and no one else to find its treasures. If the museum was sentient, that is, not just rock and wood and glass. So what do we do with him? Catherine leaned over and felt for Jeff's pulse. He's alive, but I'll bet he has a tsunami of a headache. He isn't part of the plan. None of the museum board is. Lindsay glanced out the window and saw the first line of a long line of yellow buses pulling up. Swell, just swell, the kids are here. A line between Catherine's eyebrows pinched together. We can drag him down to the basement and leave him there. Hopefully he'll take the hint when he wakes up in Amscray. Kids streamed off the first bus. Fine, I guess we can drag him down there via the elevator and let him chill out for an hour or so. The two women heaved Jeff's unconscious body forward. This man definitely needs to diet, Lindsay grunted. He needs something, Catherine agreed and punched the elevator button. The doors refused to open when reaching the basement. Dratted elevator, Lindsay fussed as the doors finally opened to the shame totem subfloor. To leave him here is almost mean. Almost, Catherine huffed. He'll be fine. We need to get back upstairs pronto.
Nicely done. Thank you so much, Mary Louise. And that's how he gets down to the basement. Chapter 19, Al Clover.
As dirt ground into his face, Jeffrey groaned. No more drinking Fireball. Still groaning, he struggled to his feet in the dark. Geez, where am I? With raised hands, he shuffled forward. What the hell? He felt a wooden carving of a human-like face, then turned, wished he had some aspirin, his head still pounded, or a drink. That would be good too. And after a few steps, encountered a wall. With a click and then whoosh, a sound much like a soda pop opening, he could see the outlined shadow of a bar. Hey, maybe I can get that drink after all. The rumors of a speakeasy looked to be true. He stepped in and the door shut him in darkness. Oh, come on. Turning around, he felt along the wall for the door handle, but there's nothing there. The wall was smooth to the touch. Okay, Jeffrey, don't panic. Wait, I'm an idiot. He reached into his pants pocket and pulled out his phone, fumbled with it, light, but no door handle or indication there ever was a door. Turning around, Jeffrey's surprised to see there are still bottles lining the mirror behind the bar. He wonders if the booze is still good. Walked over and picked up a bottle, blowing the layers of dust off. A perfectly preserved bottle of old Granddad bourbon, still sealed. Not as usual, but in a pinch, it'll do. Wiping the dust from a glass, Jeffrey cracked the bottle open and poured a healthy slug. At the other end of the bar, he saw an entryway leading to stairs going up. Jeffrey almost tripped in his haste to reach the top of the stairs, and a door. Reaching for the doorknob, it's open. He perceived an odd smell as his phone lit the room. It was a rather small room with shelves and another door. He fell, tripping over something. Fuck! He jerked away from the skeleton that was sprawled out on the floor beneath him. Well, there's the origin of that odd smell. He scrambled on hands and knees away from the body, pushing up against the shelving, and the impact knocked a bag from the top shelf, landing on his already painful head. The pain exploded behind his eyes in a white spot that blinded him for a moment. His phone was on the floor, illuminating the skeleton with clothes deteriorated from the ravage of time. Turning away and not looking in the direction of the dead body, he focused on the pain in his head and then the bag that had contributed to that pain. Reached for the heavy bag, pulled it towards him. It clinked and something shifted inside. Unzipped the top, intrigued as the contents sparkled from within, forgetting the dead body, and reached inside, pulling out a handful of shiny quarters. Thank you.
Nice, Al. Al gives us the speakeasy. Well done. We're skipping chapter 21, Isabel's chapter. I think she's still not here.
About Heidi, 20.
And oh, sorry, Heidi. And Heidi, 20. Thank you, Heidi.
Catherine couldn't keep her thoughts straight during the tour with the fourth graders. They were squirrely, demanding, and disinterested in anything that didn't move, which was everything in the exhibits if she didn't count the 2 flies spinning on their backs on the windowsill in the doll room. Catherine had just left the dinosaur room and where the fourth graders were lingering with 3 adults when the whale let loose. Spam is a great thing to interrupt you. Okay, the door swung shut, locking her out. She rushed to the top of the grand staircase, thinking the cry came from there. The sound of a different man's voice spun her. Oh, Catherine, the portrait of Josiah Walker said, this is good fun. Catherine rubbed her eyes. For real? She asked in a small voice. Je retournerai, Josiah boomed. It feels so good to use my voice. I encourage you to try it while you have the ability and people don't look at you like you're a talking portrait. Catherine shivered. Goosebumps rose on her skin. Is there something you wanted to share with me? What do you love, Catherine? My cats? What gets you out of bed? What propels you from one day to the next? Coffee. Come now, I'm being serious. She looked at the floor. I don't know. Today isn't the best day to ask me that. Why do you spend so much time here? She looked up. Josiah's eyes bore into her and she teared up. I see, he said. Tender. You're not the only one. What do you want? Catherine asked, feeling poked. Me? Nothing. But maybe there is something you can do for you, this place, and children in the future. I'm listening. Find the man Ted. He's here in the building and has been given instructions. He can be relied on to transport the item that will repair a long ago wrong I was party to. Does this have something to do with the shame totem? It does, but it might not be what you think. Enlist the passion of other women. Like you, they do not yet know their roles, but they are open, creative, talented, seeking. They found their way here, so in that sense, you have all arrived. You are in the right place at the right time. They too are tender. Josiah winked. Catherine, Lindsay called up from the first floor. Yes, I'm here, she descended. That old portrait doesn't creep you out with its eyes following you all the time? No, it's more like watching out for me. Ah, well, we have some problems. Catherine nodded. Like fourth graders locked in the dinosaur room? Thank you.
Nice. And Heidi gave us the talking portrait, which I used later on. That was fun. Okay, now we're skipping chapter 21 because I think Isabel's not here, and moving to Brenda Astrino.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Chapter 22 in 3 parts. We start with the stuffed and invisible Carolina parakeets in the basement. The parakeets fly hither and yon, deciding that they would do their part to keep the Walker Museum alive. Why, we'll blow us up a storm if need be. Avery signals Billy Bob to watch the human called Jeff spewing forth obscenities mixed with groans. Billy Bob gives a signal meaning not worth the hulls of eaten seeds. Avery flies closer and whispers, even the turkey vulture has a larger function that serves the good of all. Now we go to the Walker Mansion, where Marilyn is struggling with her memory and thoughts about the past. It's a good day, and she's singing, "We'll be coming round the mountain when she comes." Woo, woo! Marilyn smiles. If she can just keep going with these tunes, she feels like she will remember more. Woo, woo! But wearing herself out, she moves to her favorite chair and soon falls asleep. In her dream, the older man with mutton chops disappears in and out of the train boxcars. One car is full of oxen manatees. In another, Marilyn sees the faces of wolves. The faces morph like moving backward in time, turning into the faces of Native Americans. Their mouths open and close, and she hears drums beating. Marilyn rubs her forehead. Oh, if I could just get some straight thoughts together, like a string of pearls. Where are those pearls? The Walker pearls. Hearing another sound, other things become clearer. Thud, thud, like a heartbeat. Now the drums start again to enrich the rhythm and flow. Feeling more integrated, she pats her arms and legs and feels herself as whole. And she feels less tortured in her thoughts from the past. I must find a way to see, to talk to Catherine. Last scene, shifts to subdued bruise. Sunny answers a phone call about an order to be delivered to the Walker Mansion. Oh, well, we don't deliver. Sunny, thanks for a moment. This is the answer. This is maybe the universe does give us answers. Ma'am, I have a break coming up soon. I'd be happy to deliver to the Walker house. It would be my pleasure. Sweet girl, you are so kind, so thoughtful with your time. Thank you. Please knock loudly. The poor dear living there is elderly. And who is this, please? And your name, please? Margaret. Thank you.
That's great. So Margaret orders coffee. Fantastic. Chapter 23, Sky. Sky Hedman.
Catherine was propped up against the great oak display, one hand holding the ice pack to the back of her head, nibbling on the last of the sticky buns. Her tawny hair hung in wisps around her face, falling loose from the ponytail that she had casually gathered this morning. The brown wool scarf around her neck fell half unraveled over her heather-colored sweater, now smudged with the 100-year dust from the floor of the speakeasy. Her black leggings crept up from her clogs, revealing just a few inches of smooth pink skin. The long morning of being interviewed by the police and trying to explain who everyone was, including the mysterious skeleton in the basement closet, had been exhausting. She still wondered what happened to the fourth graders in the dinosaur room and who called the police. Margaret, the great auk, found the whole story very entertaining, perfectly posing within her display case, but hanging on eagerly to every word. Catherine had been relieved when Jeff was extracted from the basement and carted off in the ambulance, Carmen dramatically releasing his hand only as they loaded him into the red and white vehicle with its flashing lights. Other than dehydration, acute alcohol poisoning, a few bangs from his foray in the museum's dark underworld, and embarrassment at being found tangled up with the corpse, Catherine figured that he would be okay. Carmen left to drive herself to the hospital to attend to Jeff, who most likely was going to have to explain her presence at his side to his wife, Dorothy. Ted had lingered in the aftermath, seeming to tether himself in front of the wolf display, crouching down and craning his neck to examine it from all angles as he munched on his sticky bun, the only thing he had eaten all day. He remained physically unscathed, although seemingly befuddled with the discovery of the skeleton and the new rooms. "You should probably have someone look at your head," he offered when Catherine tried unsuccessfully to get up from the floor. She slumped back down. "The world is spinning," she said, grabbing her head and closing her eyes. "You need to go home," Ted said, hoping to make a quick exit himself. "If someone could just help me to my car, I have to get home to my mother." "You can't drive yourself home," Lindsay jumped in. "You're in no shape to make that long drive, and besides, you have a head injury. I'll drive you." "You can't drive with that broken finger." Lindsay's left hand was splinted with tongue depressors and adhesive tape from the museum's aging first aid kit, uncovered in the bottom drawer of the overstuffed file cabinet. It was found right under the archival glue used to reattach the feathers to the great auk. "It's my left hand. I can drive all right." Lindsay's hand throbbed, but she suddenly didn't want to let Catherine out of her sight. Truth be told, she wanted to give Catherine a big hug right now. So much was becoming clearer, but so much else needed to be explained.
Yes, it does. Nicely done, Sky. Great. Chapter 24, Laura Rink.
Archie was surprised when Emma opened his study door and let in Carmen. Carmen crossed the room and sat in the easy chair across from his, near the fireplace, the stack of wood from his morning fire now reduced to red coals and a bed of white ash. Archie, I saw it. There was only one it these days. Carmen's face was flushed with intellectual enthusiasm. Long ago, they had worked well together. What happened? Archie felt his face flush. Something to do with him, perhaps? He didn't want to think about that. He wanted to think about the shame totem. It's marvelous, isn't it? Yes, Carmen replied. And did you know there's a speakeasy down there? Of course I knew that. Cubist paintings on the walls? Really? I haven't been in that room. Why not? To Archie, her words felt like an accusation, not an inquiry. I haven't been through every nook and cranny of that place. Why ever not? Who knows where historical artifacts may be hidden? Archie pictured the museum's steep staircases and narrow passageways and cold, drafty alcoves and shrugged his shoulders. You're not losing your curiosity, are you, old man? Archie started to take offense, but hell, at 83, he was an old man, with all the body aches to prove it, aches that were sometimes subdued by his medicinal use of BC Bud, as Ted called it. Archie smiled. No, not the curiosity. Didn't I prove that the other night, sneaking into the museum with you? Carmen nodded. But our conversation the next morning about the shame totem, I think we were approaching it wrong, both of us. Archie leaned forward. But you made the excellent point. The revealing Josiah's shame is also revealing a debt that might have real monetary consequences for the museum. Thank you for acknowledging my excellent point, Archie. Well, of course, Carmen held up her hand. Here's what I came to say. Shame has power when it stays hidden. You bring it out into the light and that light can dissolve it. Well, it takes more than just light. I don't know if Josiah's debts can be repaid, but acknowledging one's mistakes means something, especially these days. Archie shifted in his chair. Maybe he'd made some mistakes, though mostly he felt that he just lived his life. Are you saying the museum should own up? Yes. Acknowledging a wrongdoing, even if it's too late to change the outcome, is still a chance for atonement. Don't you think, Archie? Archie gazed at the red embers in the fireplace. Was there more than one conversation going on here? Thank you.
Yes, there is. Thank you, Laura. Fantastic. Chapter 25, Mary Lou Haberman. Unmute yourself, Mary Lou.
Okay. Tony found herself in a tizzy. Not an excited, happy one like she got when a big sale went through, but a tizzy of fury. Who did that Paul think he was anyway to tell me he needed to think about working with me? I'm the only way he'll be able to do anything with the dilapidated museum and those moldy stuffed animals. And where did he find that goofball who said that crap about the orcas? Damn him. Now what am I going to do? She started to doubt herself. Maybe it wasn't even worth selling. It was just too far gone and should be torn down. But she didn't bother to take off her stilettos or makeup. She'd been up all night pacing, smoking, and fuming until she decided to take another look. At least take a closer look on the outside of the monstrosity. Surely she hadn't been wrong about selling it to Paul. She jacked herself up on coffee at Subdued Brews and thought, what a sad excuse for a woman that girl is. Sunny, with her special powers, heard what Tony thought and pondered the nature of evil. Tony left the shop with her nose pinched and adjusted her chip-card sunglasses as she marched toward the museum. Soon she stopped, stared, and with hands on hips, declared with a terrible screech, unbelievable! What a piece of garbage! Not even mediocre, just crap. Thrown together like the architect was one of those disgusting narcissists who think no matter what they do, it's a gloriously holy masterpiece. Just then, she felt a tremble under her feet. She wobbled. One of her heels broke off and pain shot into her ankle. Then she heard an ear-splitting gasp and cough, as if someone were about to cough up a lung. She looked up and saw a car-sized ball of dust coming straight toward her, closer and closer, until tiny bits of dirt shattered her eyes. Tony panicked, froze, and whispered, "Oh shit," as she looked again and then took in her very last breath. The museum snickered, and her beloved children cheered.
Thank you, Mary Lou. Mary Lou's the first one to kill somebody off. Well, Lydia was killed off, I guess, a long time ago, right? All right, chapter 26. That's me. The museum breathed in the taste of victory as the ambulance came to collect Tony's remains. Now there would be no need to press back against a potential sale, as if she could be sold, like an object. As the matriarch and host of stories, both victorious and dark, she was ready to bring everyone together and unfold her mysteries and to guide her family, all of them, the living ones and the children in the collections, to justice, truth, and reconciliation. But she would need them all present, each and every player. And it had better be after dark, when the children inside her safekeeping could animate and move about as needed. She would open the maw of her heart and draw them to her, board members, community, and ghosts. With the Walker pearls in hand, Lindsay and Catherine entered the museum somberly. They'd agreed they would file the pearls immediately in the cabinet in Lindsay's office. And so after they'd rested, they drove back into town together. They also concurred that Lydia's skeleton should not be left in the secret room off the speakeasy and had decided that as unpleasant a job as it might be, they would not let her bones rest one more night alone. Catherine kept thinking about Madeleine Albright's quote, "There is a special place in hell for women who don't help other women." Neither Lindsay nor Catherine wanted to be in that hell. But in getting Jeff out of that room and into the ambulance, the bones had been left unattended. The two women would put Lydia in the doll's encasement for the night. Lindsay hoped that Marilyn had given her a gift of great wisdom with the pearls, but she genuinely didn't understand why these phrases, written as titles across the 6 pages of yellowing paper, could be significant. And Marilyn could say no more when questioned. The many strokes she'd had, resulting in her seeing odd shapes and disconnected images, may have given her the second sight into realms beyond, but they'd also scrambled her language center. The rumble was at first muffled, and then the words began to emerge more clearly. Catherine looked up at the painting of Josiah. She watched his eyes. He was staring into her, serious, repeating a series of names. Lydia, Andrew, Carmen, Jasmine, Jeff, Archibald, Sunburst, Ted, and then again. The names repeated, with Josiah's voice becoming clearer and clearer with each repetition until it was obvious he was giving a list of names. Finally, Lindsay spoke in a whisper, "Catherine, am I hearing things, or are you hearing that painting of your great-great-grandfather speaking to us too?" Thank you. Chapter 27, Sean Dwyer.
Yeah, Cami and I started the descent towards the ending here. And so a lot happens. I'd want to give a shout out to the people who have made it through all 9 years alongside me. "Hello," a loud male voice called from above, the word echoing through the various pathways to the totem room. "Josiah told me to come, not sure why." Everyone looked at Catherine for an answer. "Sounds like Pete Masters. Do you think Josiah wants him here now?" "I want him." Josiah's deep voice rumbled. That was good enough. "Pete!" Lindsay yelled. "Yeah." "Take the elevator down. You'll find us when the door opens." Carmen frowned. "Why isn't he at the hospital or whatever where his dead wife is?" The elevator stopped rattling and the door opened. Pete stepped hesitantly toward them. "I'm not sure capital is an issue," he said. A little bit of a jump there. All heads jerked in his direction. "Tony has put aside a ridiculous amount of money," he continued. "It's obviously mine now." He sighed, but he didn't shed a tear. "I'm really sorry about Tony," Catherine said, and everyone concurred. You don't need to be, Pete replied. Tony had it in for this place. She thought she was goddess, knowing what was best for the building and for her. A juicy commission so she could walk away from this looming mess even richer. Sorry to interrupt, but I'm not sure why we don't need a capital campaign, Jeff said. Pete sniffed and said, I can front up to $5 million as an interest-free loan. That's wonderful, Archie said, but I'm not sure much of your money will be needed. That's true, Jasmine said, her eyes glazed over. Lydia here. Those quarters bear a Carson City mint mark. They are uncirculated, and they may fetch you $20,000 each. I did the right thing, yes? Everyone sat, stunned. Lindsay spoke up finally. Very much so, Lydia, she said. The coins are great, Archie said, but the building isn't much of an inheritance for now. Nonsense, Lydia replied. I know several of you have seen what lies under the dome. Gold leaf? Catherine asked. Gold bullion, was the reply. I fully expected the house to go to my boy. The entire dome has a lining of bullion. Uh-oh, I'm running out of room. How'd that happen? It should go to his heir now. Use what you need to repair the structure and give the rest to my great-granddaughter. Catherine burst into tears. I love this building. Nothing would make me happier than to have a share of the treasures hidden in it to serve to keep it alive and well. Let's see what the other messages among the pearls say, Sunburst said. She looked at the remaining pages. She held its always darkest before the dawn up to the candlelight. The clock in the tower struck 5 a.m. Suddenly, the she-wolf sat up and howled. Thank you.
Nice.
Ooh.
Ooh. I think Patty is still not here for chapter 28. So if I'm right about that, then Sean, take it away for chapter 29.
So I'll unmute myself again. I tried to get Matt Morgan to write this. He was otherwise occupied. Mom, so Marilyn showed up. Mom, Catherine gasped. How did you get here? Easy. After Josiah told me to come, I got an Uber ride. He told you to come? He asked if you know why the she-wolf howled. She's pregnant. Feel her belly. Archie rubbed the wolf's belly. It's hard as a rock. Jasmine raised her hands in the air and Lydia's bones rattled. Help her give birth and you will be rewarded. How do we do that? Lindsay asked. Cesarean, Catherine said. She pulled nail scissors from her purse and began to snip at the seam of the wolf's belly. She slid her fingers in. Metal! She tugged on the mass in the belly. Everyone screamed when the animal delivered a mass of more gold coins. And you thought I was full of baloney, Marilyn said, arching her brows. They handed the other bag of gold coins to Jeff for safekeeping. Another gift from Lydia. Can this get any better? Yes, it can, Jasmine said softly, her eyes closed. In response, the parakeets flew back to the door they had uncovered. On a dusty table sat a wood carving, also dusty, but in impeccable shape. About 2 feet tall, it was a statue of a tree with a crow sitting on a branch, a fish in its mouth. Archie picked it up and looked at the base. Yale Luke As Josiah Walker was etched into the smooth bottom of the statue. As, that's Clinket, Sunburst said. One of the few words my grandmother taught me. Tree. Catherine said, I suspect the birds have more to show us. Undoubtedly, Andrew said, but I think we should read the secret messages before we leave the candles behind. Sunburst held the third pearl up to the candlelight again, and everyone leaned forward to read the words as they appeared. It looks like the sun also rises. Lindsay sounded puzzled. I thought that was the title of a Hemingway novel, but Josiah was long dead by the time the book was published. Ecclesiastes, Archie said. New generations. Follow your dreams, declared the next of Josiah's pearls. In the candlelight, another spidery message emerged. Every generation has its own dreams. More of the same, ventured Catherine, encouraging us to restore the museum, but in a modern way with technology and a more inclusive interpretation of history. One more pearl, said Pete, picking up the last yellowed page. It says, you never know what goes on behind closed doors. He bent forward to watch new words materialize, lost his balance, and fell. The ancient document flared up and turned to black ash in a second. I'm so sorry, so now I guess we'll never know. Nonsense, Josiah's voice rumbled. Everyone froze, waiting to hear more. Follow parakeets through time. With several flashlights lit, Catherine and Lindsay extinguished the candles. Avery and Billy Bob flew in circles overhead, then they flew into the elevator and perched atop its brass railing. Jeff said, with all these new treasures, we can store or sell the dusty old stuff and burnish our reputation. The building shook, dust raining from the rafters. Then the she-wolf howled again, and the parakeets hovered above Jeff and dumped a load of shit on his head. Or not, Jeff added. Lindsay, Jasmine, and Pete stepped into the elevator. The door shut on its own, and the car surged upward. Thank you.
Oh, that's great, Sean. See, that brain injury didn't ruin your capacity to do fiction.
That's right.
Chapter 30, bringing us home, our leader, Marian Exall.
So it was, on the next full moon, Ron Wolfrunner, Lindsay, Catherine, Andrew, Carmen, Sonny, and Ted gathered at an isolated beach several miles outside town. The place was sacred to the local tribes. From here, each summer, they launched canoes to paddle to the annual gathering of all the native peoples of the Pacific Northwest: Tlingit, Haida, Bella Coola, Chinook, Makah, Tillamook, and the rest. In silence, the group arranged their burdens along the tide line, then stepped back. Margaret rested against Charles. Avery and Billy Bob propped each other up. The wolf's glass eyes shone in the moonlight, and dinosaur bones rattled against the pebbles. Ron sang a song of farewell in a language older than the rocks they stood on. They all waited, watching the advancing tide. When the water began to lap against the manatee's belly, a cloud obscured the moon. In the sudden darkness, the humans heard the swish of wings and a splash. The cloud passed on and the tide turned. Moonlight returned to show an empty beach. As the humans turned to leave, they heard a wolf howl somewhere in the distance. The end.
Fantastic. You guys can all unmute yourselves and give a shout out to the group.
Yeah.
Fun.
Great job. This was so much fun. Fun. Thank
So
you.
beautiful.
Yeah.
It's just great.
We needed that.
Yes, we did.
Absolutely.
Totally. I mean, nothing
High
has
point of the
helped me
year.
feel part of life again like this has. So grateful
Hey, it
to
really
you all.
worked this time. It really did. It's a real book.
Yeah, it's rich. It's complicated.
It didn't depend on murders for plot twists.
Yeah, character development.
Super well done.
Yay. Thank you for letting Margaret go. That was just.
I
Oh.
know one of you, but you are all wonderful writers and you are great storytellers as well.
Thank you. That was so fun.
I think the 3-minute limit was good, actually.
Yeah.
It flowed nicely.
It did. Well, dear ones, until next year, right? Well, we have happy hour next month, but so we'll see you next month for happy hour. And Lisa Daly, I can't see you on my screen, but there was a question about the previous chapters. Can you tell us where to find or the previous books from previous years? Can you just quickly tell us where all the year's books are on the website?
If you go to the Red Wheelbarrow website and you go under publications, which is that first link in the menu, and scroll down, it goes through all of our books, and then there's a huge section for NaNoWriMo collection, and there's a link to the story from every year.
Wow.
And then I'll add one for this year as well, and I'll add this video to it.
Cool. Yep.
That'd be great.
Yeah, we have written I'm going to say 12 books, is that right?
At least 11. It's been 9 years plus two or three extras, so 11 or 12.
Right.
Wait a minute. How can it be 11?
Because we had a year where we had so many people who wanted to do it that with Laura's chapter, Laura Kalpakian's chapter, we started 2 books and we gave one horror genre.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
In 2012, you did 2 books because of overflow, and that's the only way I got into this thing.
Yeah.
I think there was another year you guys did 2 also, and I didn't realize that. So I think there's still another year I have to put up there. But 2012, both renditions are up there.
Okay.
Yeah, the one titled Arboretum had 2 versions.
Arboretum. Okay, I'll look for that.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody could find the other version. Anyway.
I might have it. I might have it.
Well, we did our best to make sure that we have archived all of the books, and I say if you need a laugh, go back and read through them.
Oh. Yeah.
Yeah, they were all fun.
They're all fun. All right, everybody.
This one was really great. Thanks to everybody, and thanks to Lisa and Cammie, Miriam especially.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Lisa was working every day on this.
I know. It all went without, without so much as a blip, and that was great. Thank you all of you for bringing all this together, bringing this all together.
And seriously, the next time you see Lisa Daly, just give her a bow. Just give her a bow.
Hey. We are
Thank you.
worthy. Yes. Okay.
Okay, everybody. Have a great holiday. See you later.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.